Hello, denizens of Arden. My name is Shoal.
Hey everybody, Rob here.
Do it for the vine! Comment here.
And we are the Sunderfellows. If you've been following our previous videos, we've been ranking various aspects of the game of Sunderfolk. We use a 5-tier system for that, from S to D. This week, we are doing the Ranger. As a reminder how our tiers work, the S tier is our game warping, uniquely powerful or encounter-altering skills. A tier, the gold standard, effective in many situations. You will consider using it most of the time. B is old, reliable, not breaking any encounters, but decently effective and pragmatic. C is where things start to fall off a little in the niche tier. You might have 1 or 2 situations where this is a good effect, but there are often better options. And finally, the D tier, lacking, never more than okay, almost always irrelevant or overshadowed, or else actively prohibits other better abilities. I think with that, we can jump right in, and if I'm not mistaken, it is me first again. Oh my gosh. Got the pick of the litter here. I think I'm going to start with one that's maybe a little more controversial. I'm going to put Volley in the A tier. So, the thing with the Ranger is most of the Ranger's damage is not in the card. It's in their passive. The Ranger gets 4 to 5 damage from their passive every attack. So Volley is not attack 2, range 3. It is attack 6 or 7, range 3, depending on your exposed, depending on your strengths. And often, if your exposed or strengths are getting added to the value of this card, that's going to be closer to like a 15, 16, 17. And the nice thing is you can put it all on one target, or you can put it on 2. I use this card every time I play the Ranger. It's not going to be the card I use every round, but this is a very reliable card. I find many situations where I'm just looking for pinging twice. The tough thing with the Ranger is she does have a lot of cards that are attack to begin. Volley has a little more flexibility because it's 2 attacks. I also don't dock as many points from a starting attack before move as I do for other characters because the Ranger is the only true ranged character in the game. Even the Arcanist has Gravity Nexus, which is, I guess, technically ranged, but you're putting yourself in a melee situation for a moment. The Ranger always operates at range. There are no cards in her deck that are not ranged options. She always is trying to stay at range. Starting it around with a range 3 attack is not the end of the world for her.
I'm still reeling over the fact that you made a 6-7 joke in the Ranger video. I think Volley makes sense. This is one of those cards that looks so much worse in theory when you first look at it than it is in practice. You look at Volley stat-wise and you laugh. This ability looks awful. This is damage 4, move 2, and you're just like, this is Weenie Hut Jr.'s level pathetic. But when you add in the Ranger's passive, it gets a lot more devastating more quickly when your passive is able to double or even triple this damage. So I think Volley makes sense. I think it's hilarious, and I am not surprised you like Volley because you are and also one of the biggest adorers of Full Steam I've ever met.
Yeah, he's a Full Steam guy.
This is essentially Full Steam, but better in every single way.
Yes.
So I'll give you this. I'm going to go to my next card, and it's probably my single favorite card on the Ranger in terms of tech. I'm going to take Snaring Vines, and I'm going to put it above Volley in A tier. This card, in my testing and based off of things that we've discussed with this group, in my personal opinion, is the best mobility card in the game. This card is crazy in its applications for mobility and in rooting opponents, because the AI in Sunderfolk is fairly predictable, and especially the earlier enemies, like the Ogre Queen, the Rampagers, even Skeletons, all just
Melee guys, basically.
You know where they're gonna walk. They're gonna walk into the vine, they're gonna trip into the vine, they're gonna get rooted by the vine, their attacks are melee, they will do nothing. Snaring Vines is at worst a way to set up traps for the enemy that you can then shoot them in the face over and over again. It's the equivalent of setting down a cobweb in Minecraft and then shooting someone with repeaters. It really is just build your own stun. And then you also have to remind yourself that at base, this is move 8, which is mobility that no other character has in the entire game, even Even Stargate cannot get you this far, which Stargate is universally agreed in this group to be the single best card in the entire game. So the fact that this has something that Stargate cannot do is crazy. Is this card like the best card in the game by itself? No. It's one of the better mobility cards, if not the single best one in the game. And just for its general applications, I cannot see a good reason for you not to bring this, especially when positioning is so important for the Ranger.
For Volley, I want to point out that I like the versatility of this card because it can either function as what Shoal mentioned as a single target DPS boost for the Ranger, or it can function as a multi-target semi-AoE card. And I like that when it functions as an AoE card, it gives the Ranger a shield buff. One of the things that the Ranger really lacks is a way to survive. So this is one of the few things that allow the Ranger to survive, just in case it can't stun the enemy, which we will get to later. Snaring Vines, Comment mentioned the AI. I think you can actually not even ignore the AI, and this works. So what do? You move to, beside an enemy or something, and then you put the vines behind the enemy. After you've created your vines, you just use a remaining move to push the enemy into the vine and then walk back off, so that you're within range 3 or something. And then you get your strength buff as well on top of that. So I think this is just such a useful card. The only reason wherein I would not consider bringing this card, Snaring Vines, is that if it's Act 3 already, where there's a lot of ranged enemies and then the map is cramped, like the Lich battle. So it means that you can't really snare them, and then you don't really need the mobility because it's a small map. So that's the only situation. But for the times that it is relevant, it's going to be relevant a lot of times in the game, such as when you have to throw enemies off pits, for example.
Yep.
It's just really a powerful card. So, and I think it's very deserving of its 8-tier ranking. Speaking of pushing enemies off into pits, which brings me to my card. So my first card I will rank is Nock Back. So it's a move 3, push 3, move 1. I'm going to rank it in the B tier. So this card reminds me a lot of Thunderclap from the Arcanist's kit, except it doesn't do damage. It creates vines, and it has an extra move, but that's it. It's the same function where you use it to push enemies off pits. However, we did rank Thunderclap in the A tier, so I don't think it can make it to the A tier. This is an example of another situational card, but when the situation happens, it's really useful. So it's useful for the times that you need to perhaps push characters into a hex objective, or there's a pit on the map, which happens a lot in Sunderfolk. So, and it becomes an auto kill card. So for those maps where there's a pit, like the boat map, or the one where you have like a hole in the middle and you have to throw a bunch of barrels into the middle of the pit, this is perfect. It allows the Ranger to kind of like, because it has a 4 move, you can possibly even push 2 creatures if you're kind of near the enemy. So you can push one with your move, and you can also push one with the push itself. I think that makes it very useful in those types of situations. And worst comes to worst, it's a move 4 card with a push 3, so still kind of useful for just, pushing back enemies out of range and then keeping yourself safe.
I really like Snaring Vines as high as it is in the A tier because, and this is something that I think applies across all tier lists we've done so far, is I find move to be more powerful than teleport or leap. So the advantages of teleport or leap is that you can get around obstacles like a wall or like a line of enemies or allies that you interact with instead of switching places with. But generally, what you're losing out on is the interaction. Like, you can't open chests, you can't swap places with allies and activate things like the Bard's passive, for example. You can't push enemies off the map. You can't push or like the corrupted mushrooms away from you and deal damage. So I find movement to be the stronger option, which is why I rank things like Bring It On pretty highly, because move works, and Snaring Vines is, I think, the best movement card in the game, because of the fact that it is move and because you can boost it. And yeah, you can stunlock enemies. Nock Back, similarly, a lot of move. I don't love that it doesn't do any damage, and that's its lowest point for me, and why I wouldn't move it higher than the B tier. But yeah, being able to push things, enemy manipulation is great. Ally manipulation less so with this card because you're really using this to stun lock melee enemies, especially bosses like the Ogre Queen. And this card is S tier for the Ogre Queen, by the way.
Yes.
Yep. It literally makes that fight so much easier. That said, I'm going to hop on to Spring Step because this is unfortunately going to go with a D tier for me. I considered putting it in the C tier, but I think it's crowded out by things that are higher rated than it. This has every problem with cards that it can have. For one, it's, for the Ranger specifically, it's a front-loaded damage card. So again, I don't have as much problem with leading attack with the Ranger because you have range and you're often going to be positioning yourself for that to be effective. But the fact that it's trying to do attack 4 when, again, you're not here for the number on the card. You're here for the passive, and the card is just there to proc that. This doesn't mean much more than, like, attack 2 on Volley. And I'm going to use Volley every time because you get the choice of where you're putting your damage more evenly, and you're dealing a lot more damage. Leap, it's not a great movement option. I'd rather just have a move. And I know it's giving you haste, and the strength bonus is really integral to the Ranger, but there are better ways to get strength. Yeah, I can't. I've never taken this card. I think there are just so many cards that do things better for the Ranger that Spring Step is never going to be in my deck.
I think I agree with both these. I think, again, that Nock Back is so hilariously good for Ogre Queen specifically that it deserves a B tier placement alone.
I cycle out Nock Back usually after I get Snaring Vines, but before you get Snaring Vines, it's really solid.
It is, yes. And
I actually keep Nock Back even if I have Snaring Vines for the maps that have pits.
Wow.
Yes, I think, for pit dependence, I think I'd actually agree with Rob here that you could, it's more niche, yes, but it certainly has its applications. Yeah, and then Spring Step, I kind of agree. This ability is, and now that I'm looking down at it, like, man, the Ranger cards were really good.
It is really crowded because you can only bring 5 max cards.
Yes, it reminds me a lot of some of the stuff we discussed with Pyro and even Berserker before, where you have so many options and so many different things you could do that trying to go with a slight alteration here, it feels very suboptimal just because of the card comparisons. Like, the move it functions better with the Vines of the Ranger in general. It's just a more natural part of their kit. I think both these are fine. I am going to go onto Hunter's Shot next. I'm going to put Hunter's Shot in the bottom of B tier. Below Nock Back pretty fairly. So, why do I think this deserves to be here? My reason is twofold. Firstly, this is comparing it directly to Refrain and Bouncing Blaze. This is Bouncing Blaze that does the same damage but targets one thing instead of 2. And it has all of its movement front-loaded instead of in the back, which the Ranger probably prefers because they want to stay at a distance anyway. The second comparison that I want to make is that this is directly Sharp Refrain, but it was better because of the Ranger's passive. This is a lot more critical for the Ranger than it is for the Bard. Like, the moment you get Inspire Harmony, you're never seeing Sharp Refrain ever again. Like, it's dead in a ditch somewhere. Whereas Hunter's Shot is a standard, solid option for the Ranger at all times. Yes, you do get better options eventually, especially once we start talking about Skullrattle, but that comes in very late game. That is the last card I believe the Ranger gets in their kit. So, Hunter's Shot is able to serve a purpose as a standardized 6 damage option, if not higher with your passive, for the Ranger that is fairly consistent at minimum into early and mid game where you fight, especially this is really good for shooting the exploding purple fungus guys in Shadowstone, or some of the wraiths that are trying to mess with your party. And it just serves a fine functionality. Is it the flashiest thing? No, it's literally move and attack. But with the Ranger's passive being able to serve it as a high damage option, it serves as a good early game tool that is your main DPS for quite a while, and it's functional. What is there more to say about it?
So I think we have our first card that we're going to move. So you push it in the B tier, and I'm gonna take my turn to actually move it down. To be honest, I had this card in the D tier behind Spring Step. And I'll explain later
Interesting.
why.
Mm.
Yeah. I'll explain later why. But for now, since we can only move down one step, we can't jump 2 steps. I'll take your argument and then just keep it in the C tier.
Okay.
Is that a hard and fast rule? Because we haven't had any situations where we've moved a card more than 1 tier yet.
Yeah, that's part of the rules of the tier list debate. You can only move up or down 1 step. You cannot jump 2 steps.
Okay.
So the card that we haven't ranked yet, but I'll talk about it here, is Piercing Arrow. So both cards are move 3. Both cards deal 4 damage in essence because Piercing Arrow deals 3 plus Expose.
Yeah.
And then this Piercing Arrow can actually, if you can position yourself properly, can either hit 2 enemies or more and can reach further. It's like a reach 8 attack. It's the highest reach card for the Ranger, which I think circumvents what you could do with Hunter Shot. So the moment I get Piercing Arrow, I'm not even considering using Hunter Shot anymore. And I think, we haven't talked about Piercing Arrow yet. Perhaps I'll get to it on my next turn. But pretty much, we already talked about earlier how I don't really like cards that just move and attack, and that's it. So, yeah, this kind of explains why I move it down, and partially, again, because, again, there's a card already in the kit, which I think is just a better version of this, which, again, we'll probably get to on a different turn.
Yes, in fact, because it's my turn, I'm actually going to do Piercing Arrow, and I'll just go ahead and put it where I think it belongs, behind Nock Back in the B tier. This is a very solid early game card, and it's your only AoE option for a very long time, because Volley you get later, and as we said, that's kind of a pseudo AoE, and Wild Bloom, I think you get a little sooner. I need to double check the order you get
Wild
cards.
Bloom after Volley, actually.
Interesting, okay, yeah. So, for a long time, Piercing Arrow remains your only AoE card, and also, as Rob mentioned, it's the only card until you get your ultimate, which you're never using, and Skullrattle Shot, which is the last card you get, that allows you to make an attack at higher than range 3. So, yeah, I guess technically Wild Bloom gives you an extra tile if you position it a certain way. Piercing Arrow, I think, is very solid, stock standard. I'm trying to think if I keep it after I get all of my cards. I think it's probably the one that stays in my deck unless I need Nock Back. But yeah, the fact that it can line up several targets. I don't think line shots are very great, as I discussed in our Arcanist video with Chaos being.
Fire Breath.
Yep, Fire Breath, same thing. Yep. Piercing Arrow is a little better because A, it does have that 5 tile range. B, you can proc your passive on many enemies with it. Yeah. C, the expose is nice. It's a little rider, but it's an extra expose on top of your passive expose. And compared to Chaos Beam, you don't have to expend mana for it, especially 6 mana, I think, which is a crazy cost when you have Gravity Nexus. 5 mana? Yeah, I'm just going to do Gravity Nexus instead. So yeah, Piercing Arrow has a place in the Ranger's deck. I don't think I'm using it as often as Volley, and especially 2 of the cards we haven't ranked yet, but that I think is where we place it. I also agree with Hunter Shot placement. I'm never using it after I get, definitely after I get Skullrattle Shot, but...
Can I ask a question to you guys? I just want to share a thought that I have before I do my next tier ranking.
Absolutely.
I'll spitball for a minute here before I rank. Comparing Piercing Arrow and Hunter Shot to Flame Breath and Bouncing Blaze from the Pyro of last week. Last week, we ranked Bouncing Blaze above Flame Breath.
Yep.
Despite the fact that it was kind of a similar setup to Hunter Shot and Piercing Arrow here, where one is a pierce that you have to line up properly and the other is a range 3.
Yep.
But I think the difference in this situation is that Hunter's Shot is always a 1-target spell.
Yes.
And Piercing Arrow has the chance to be multiple, whereas Bouncing Blaze, if you're playing Pyro properly, should always be a double-target spell. Is that a kind of good, accurate, assessment of why Piercing Arrow is better here and why Flame Breath was worse last week?
For me, absolutely. Piercing Arrow, I often get 2, and it's not out of the realm of possibility to get 3 enemies on the shots I do see for it, and those are really the situations I'm going to use it. Ranger has good options outside of Piercing Arrow, but especially early game, you really love seeing those line shots.
Another reason why we rank Bouncing Blades higher compared to where Hunter Shot is this week, aside from the extra target, is that it splits the move, wherein you can move before and after.
True.
And we're extolling the virtues for the Pyro of possibly being able to pick up the fire that you leave around, right? So it doesn't bother, your summons or your rogues or your bards.
Please, just a smidgen of fire, I beg you.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it was a very big point, I think, for Bouncing Blades. In terms of why Piercing Arrow is above Fire Breath, well, aside from the AoE, the Expose is nice. It works well with other, allies such as the Rogue, wherein you could help it reach its Execute range, or, as probably we'll talk more about this when we get to the Rogue, if ever you decide to bring Sense Weakness, and I think you should if you're playing with a Ranger, is that it allows the Rogue to deal a lot of damage with Sense Weakness. And, stacking debuffs is a way to do that. I think that's a slight edge as well for Piercing Arrow.
All right, my main mental that I was having trouble putting Hunter Shot in C tier was the haunting reminder of our tier list that I put Sharp Refrain in C tier. Where in my personal opinion, Hunter Shot is just straight up better.
Yes, absolutely. I would
the overall ranking, like a higher C tier versus a low C tier.
Yeah, Sharp Refrain is like bottom of C tier.
Yep.
I just need to remember that. So okay, that's fine. All right. Hopefully for one that'll actually get right this time. Yeah, Skullrattle's S. Is there any discussion about this?
No, but we should highlight why. But yeah, it's S.
Allow your bard, your minstrel, to instrumentalize how insanely busted this card is. Yeah, this is the most consistent stun, except for maybe there's a card in the Rogue's kit. Let me pull it up here. Sneak Attack, yes. This is arguably one of the most consistent stuns in the entire game. The most consistent range stun at worst, which, good on you, Ranger. This is like the last card you get, and this is like only rivaled by...
It's a capstone. It's a real capstone.
This is like rivaled by Bard as the character who really needs their last card the most. Skullrattle takes a pretty solid kit that the Ranger already has and cranks up the volume to a ridiculous extent. This is a move 2, and you might think, oh, well, it's only got 2 movement, but positioning for the Ranger is easy anyway because of how many vines they leave around and how much they want to stay at a range anyway, so you really just need to get in range of your target. And then it's attack 5 at range 4, which both of those numbers seem hilariously strange for how high they are in general. You don't often see range 4, you often see range 3. And you often see attack 4, you don't often see attack 5. And then, of course, the holy grail, that is, if you have strength, you get stun. Which, there are oodles, canoodles, and toaster strudels of methods of getting strength in this game, from Lava Rock to the Ranger's other options like Scout Ahead and Snaring Vines, to any of the ally-related things that you can give you strength. Don't even get me started on the Bard. This is the best card in the Ranger's kit. It's a consistent stun. It's arguably one of the most important boss tools in the game. This card just rocks.
Agreed. I think it's also worth noting, because usually I don't talk about weapons during our debates. I think it's worth noting that if you can, as a Ranger, befriend Zuri, the hyena, because it gives out the best weapon for the Ranger's kit. So that weapon will actually give you 2 strength every time somebody draws a +2, whether it's you or allies. So which activates pretty often, which allows you to be able to use this card often enough. And that you probably just need to spec your deck with strength buffs or have an extra trinket like a lava rock or a fungal beacon that can provide you strength, and you're covered. You'll be able to use this card every turn if you wanted to. And using it every turn if you wanted to is another strength of this card, because it's not an ultimate, unlike Starfall. When you get to boss fights, you can just stun, let's say, the Lich every turn, or the Prophet every turn, and they can't do anything. we know the bosses have like a reactionary turn, right? And when you take your turn, the boss gets a turn. This technically just removes that turn.
I think anytime I ever see someone use Zuri's weapon ability into this card, I think I'm going to nickname it Gaslight Gatekeep Girl Boss, because that's exactly what it is.
Our Knights, get in the comments. Who's the true ship for the Ranger? Is it Batu? Batu, and her being the fill-in mom for Tuya, or is it Zuri? Or as I affectionately like to call it, Ruri.
Anyway, so yeah, Skullrattle Shot, last point on it. I think this is the saving grace of the Ranger. When the game came out, I was reading, like comments in the Discord, and most of them would say the Ranger's the weakest class. Of course, they bring up how weak Snipe is, right, and how, boring the Ranger's kit is. I've heard the same comments with the Berserker, but still. So people were like thinking, at least the Berserker has Roar, and the Ranger only has Snipe. This card actually puts this, I think, in my eyes, the Ranger above the Berserker. It redeemed its kit to the point it's actually useful. Like, you would want to have a Ranger in the party. Anyway, I'll be ranking Scout Ahead. I'll be ranking Scout Ahead in the A tier, behind Snaring Vines, and ahead of Volley. So, might be a bit high, so let me explain why. So first off, we already established earlier, unlike, let's say, the Rogue or the Berserker, having an attack then move is not too bad. Okay, I think the Pyro and the Berserker and the Rogue all need the move then attack setup. Rangers, not so much, because you have range in the attack anyway. So this gives you an attack 3, move 3, and then you can get strength buff, which is important again for Skullrattle Shot, and of course a couple of exposes. So, first off, I'm okay with the attack and move. The strength buff is useful, again, to set up Skullrattle Shot. That's going to be your main move in the game. And then 2 exposes. So, if you think about it, this is just like Spring Step. You're only activating the Ranger's passive once. It's not really going to beat Volley in damage that way. So, how does it compete? It competes by using the 2 exposes. 2 exposes function as technically like 4 damage extra. Not as good as, I think, Volley, because the Volley can draw a fake card. Okay, but in certain situations, this can actually be more useful. Again, we talk about the sense weakness on the Rogue, and this can add like an extra 10 damage to the Rogue's sense weakness. Lastly, I think as well, I like the idea that they allow you to split the expose, because if you're coordinating with your party, you can kind of like, okay, maybe this enemy just needs a little bit more damage. We'll put one expose there, and we'll put the other expose on the boss, something like that. So I think it's nice that it allows you to divide the damage around, essentially functioning like a semi-pseudo multi-target. So, and I think Scout Ahead is, for me, is the primary way to ensure you get a strength buff before you have Zuri's weapon, or before you have enough money to get all the strength trinkets you want, or the strength faith cards. Because Snaring Vines, there will be times that there will be no enemies around, okay, that you can root, or you don't need the mobility option. This one allows you to get an attack in and the strength bonus. And then it's also why it's, Spring Step is useless, because you already have this.
All right, I gotta knock some teeth this time around. I'm sorry. Before I do, I will briefly comment. Skullrattle Shot is so kit warping, because that strength, then stun, you will focus the entire Ranger build, everything that has to do with their deck, their fate cards, their meals, trinkets, weapon, around strength. If you're not generating strength every turn, you are wasting your turn. At least the possibility of using Skullrattle Shot. It's still, honestly, a good card even without the stun, just because it's move and then a range 4 attack. It gives you a lot of flexibility, but that stun is so integral. Rob, you are a rogue main. You have played the Ranger in a lot of 2-party compositions with the rogue. And I think, agreeably, and correct me if this isn't your opinion, but they're the best duo combo in the game, because they can stun
for bosses.
Yeah, for bosses. They can stun a boss indefinitely. Scout Ahead is a really good card with the Rogue if you're taking, not Soul Thief, Sense Weakness, because of that expose. I think there are way easier and better ways to generate strength that don't involve using a card turn to do it, to set up a Skullrattle Shot. And I also think that Volley completely outclasses Scout Ahead because it's got better damage. At rank, the final rank of your passive, you're dealing 4 plus expose, which is strictly better than 2 exposes. I'm going to put Scout Ahead at the bottom of B tier because you will use it for a while. But once you get Volley, I basically just discard this card. It's very solid early game. That expose can be effective, but once your passive scales appropriately, it's almost a strictly worse version of Volley for me. And I'll give you some examples of strength options you can use, and this will be featured in, if we ever get around to doing guides, like I like to at some point, a Ranger guide. You can use the P-Day Pinwheel. Very simple, very effective. It's a meal, costs like 20 gold, I think. I think it's one of the cheapest options. And all you have to do is, I think it's end your turn next to an ally. Yeah, and you get strengthened. Zuri's weapon we mentioned is probably the easiest way to do it. I forget the exact activation card cost on that, but it's 2 strength for 1 expose on all your allies. And all your allies get strengthened too, by the way. They get the expose as well, but I mean, I'll take that trade any day. Because you can even stack it multiple times a turn if you're using it effectively. You can use, obviously, the Lava Rock Opus. I genuinely consider taking 2 Lava Rock Opuses on Ranger just because Strengthen is that solid for Skullrattle. Trying to think of other ways. You can get it from the Bard's passive. You can get it from... Oh, Fungal Beacon. Fungal Beacon, yeah. There are so many ways to get that strengthened without using a turn to burn Scout Ahead. And frankly, if you're going to use a card to get strength, I mean, it's going to depend on the situation, but Snaring Vines is the better card, and that's probably the one that I'm going to actually use for a turn and feel like I accomplished something. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I can't let Scout Ahead be that high. Especially when I'm considering Skullrattle Shot, Snaring Vines, Volley, maybe Nock Back or Piercing Arrow, and then we haven't ranked our final card, which I think I'm going to turn over to Comet now to do, if you'd like, or to move stuff.
I do like Scout Ahead a lot, actually. I think I'm reflecting on this, because my main argument I was going to present to put Scout Ahead above Piercing Arrow was that it's better for bosses, which it is. But the problem is that would you really use it for bosses when you have Skullrattle and Nock Back for Ogre Queen? Which, that's the part where I have trouble. Because I think...
Yeah, you're not.
You're not going to, so the only time Scout Ahead has even a chance of showing up is Prophet, if you're using it for bosses, which I actually do think it's very good there. I think that cannot be denied. Because that fight, especially in Shadowstone, can be kind of her healing herself a lot. And then you need to break through that consistent replenishing of her own HP. So I think Scout Ahead being able to be essentially a potential damage 9 spell is notable for that fight. With the Ranger buff and the double expose.
Damage 10 instead of damage 9. You get like attack 3.
Oh, because the passive
and then
buff.
4 expose. Yeah.
Yes. So long as it's B tier because of that applicability, because I think it's really good for Prophet, because I don't think you have Skullrattle at the time. I think it's good. I'm happy with where it is then. Okay, on to Wild Bloom. I have been so back and forth on this card, man.
It occupies the same niche as Piercing Arrow and Volley as well. I think that's why.
Yeah. I mean...
Just different situations.
Okay, I'm going to be so real before I rank this card. I think that if you do not have an Arcanist, you never bring this card ever.
Ah, interesting.
I think you just have better options. I think Piercing Arrow is just the better option. Because, yes, the vines are fine if you spawn them in the area. But Snaring Vines is better. And it gives you the strength buff, where this doesn't. And if you want the damage, you'll go with Volley instead. So...
Right.
the applications for this of how frequently you get people lined up in this space is the exact reason we did not like Fireball from the Pyromancer. That we made this same argument. That being said, the fact that the best character in the game has one of the best singular moves in the game that lines up the enemies to be in this exact position specifically does give this card some points for me. So, overall, I think I'm gonna put this in B tier, and I think I'm just barely gonna put this under Piercing Arrow. I think it does have its applications. I think there are certainly times you can bring it and you wouldn't be upset, because you can combine this with Nexus. You can combine this with the stuff that you have to deal with in Chapter 2, and you could even use this as an option for, like, hitting one or two of those dudes in the slime missions, and then spawning the vines to overwrite the slimes that are left over. Because if the guy can't use the slimes to heal himself, then you're essentially dealing 2 extra damage. Like, that is just the math. But I think in most cases, you'd want Volley instead. And I think if your party can serve to set up Wild Bloom effectively, you can use it well. I just don't know if it can escape B tier because of that.
Actually, I would have put it in the B tier as well. Before this, I was actually going to, just to chime in again on Scout Ahead, I was okay if you guys dropped Scout Ahead to B tier. I just wasn't sure I'd rank it behind Piercing Arrow and Wild Bloom. But okay, I get the arguments. I think Piercing Arrow and Wild Bloom are close. They both have the capability to hit at least 2 targets. It's essentially the Whirlwind argument, right?
Yep.
The difference is, unlike Volley, which can also hit 2 targets, Piercing Arrow and Wild Bloom can actually hit 3. Again, just like Whirlwind compared to Takedown or Full Steam. Of the 2, I do prefer Piercing Arrow ahead of Wild Bloom because of the expose and because the move happens before the attack. This one happens after the attack, so if you're not in range to start the turn, then it's useless. And it really hurts that the vines are randomly placed, so you can't kind of like put the vine behind an enemy so you can just push them into it afterwards. You can't do that. So I think it's definitely behind Piercing Arrow. I'm just not sure if it's behind Scout Ahead. I'm going to move Wild Bloom behind Scout Ahead.
Okay.
So I think the top cards are clear. If you're taking 4, you're most likely taking Skullrattle Shot, Snaring Vine, Volley, and then Nock Back when it's applicable. When it's not applicable, then it's Piercing Arrow. It's clear. So when we're looking at Scout Ahead and Wild Bloom, we're looking at the 5th card slot, which you will probably get late in the game. Because I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, this is the last upgrade for the Smithy. You're getting the 5th card slot pretty late, so it's the only time I'm really considering picking between these 2. I would still consider bringing Scout ahead of Wild Bloom. Probably for the situation we're in. I remember doing the map where you have to light a bunch of lanterns. What I disliked about that fog area is that there's no enemies around. You can pretty much do nothing, and then you're scared of moving your ranger forward because it's one of the more fragile characters. So what I'd usually do is that I'm going to use Scout Ahead to just skip the attack and then move 3. And since I'm not within range of an enemy, I just get the strength buff. I didn't want to use Snaring Vines because if I get too far ahead, then I'm the target. So, or sometimes I just have to tell the ally or whoever I'm playing with, okay, let me take the last attack. I'll kill the last remaining enemy before you have to move ahead in the fog. So I'll use the Scout Ahead attack first, move, gain the strength buff, then the other ally would just move ahead towards the fog. I think there's situational uses wherein I think Scout Ahead is more superior to Wild Bloom. And I think Wild Bloom uses its usefulness because Piercing Arrow is around, and because we can't really rely on the Arcanist being around always. I think you're pretty close, and I'm not really too sure. So before I lock in this switch, I want to hear you guys' arguments if you think Wild Bloom should still remain ahead of Scout Ahead.
I think Shoal can pitch to this. I'm fine either way.
Sure. I'll give you another scout ahead scenario, maybe. You're fighting the mushrooms and the explodey ones. You need to push one with a melee character after your turn or something. The expose can be nice on that because it goes from 1 damage on the push to 3 damage or potentially 5 damage on the push. And that causes them to explode in a certain way. Again, these are fairly niche scenarios, and I would be hard-pressed to find situations where I wouldn't rather just shoot it with Volley. Wild Bloom, I think, is the better, like, the area of effect that it affects is better than Piercing Arrow. Piercing Arrow is really your, like, ultimate range card in some ways. Like, I have an enemy that, it's the further, aside from your ult, but you're never using your ult, so don't worry about it. Piercing Arrow is a good reach card. It can be a good AoE. It synergizes well with the kit. The fact that you get the move before it. I mean, I've made my opinion on Scout Ahead pretty clear. I think it deserves bottom of B tier. I think my final deck often looks like Skullrattle Shot, Snaring Vines, Volley, Piercing Arrow typically, Nock Back sometimes, and then Wild Bloom. I usually don't take Scout Ahead. Ultimately, it's your decision. You have the power here, Rob.
I think these two are incredibly close, actually, because I think where you could argue that Wild Bloom is better with Arcanist, you could also argue Scout Ahead's better with Rogue. I think they have the same argument as to why they're in B tier, which is they are very okay cards that get cranked up when you have a certain character in your party. And I think they are going to be forever your 5th card. And sometimes not even, because Nock Back will just take its place. So I think, regardless of the order, I think they are 2 of the closer cards we've discussed in general. So I really don't know how much the order matters itself. And it doesn't surprise me, Rob, that you lean towards putting Scout ahead because you play Rogue as your main character. And Shoal, you were the one who's talked a lot of the highs of Arcanist. So I think it doesn't surprise me that this is the debate that we're having. I think these 2 cards are incredibly close.
So with that said, so I guess since it's my pick, I'll just keep it as is. I'll indeed move Wild Bloom back to behind Scout Ahead. But again, I maintain that they're close. They both have their uses. I just think that once you get Piercing Arrow, I think there's more situations where I consider personally using Scout Ahead over Wild Bloom.
Yeah, and then, because think about it this way, too. And Shoal, to use your point and a lot of what we've argued before, we've agreed that multi-attacks that you hit twice are better in general than those that use once, because you use 2 Fate cards, so you get better buffs and more general. The Fate cards tend to be more positive than negative in late game because you have more pluses than minuses. So in general, having multiple attacks is better. So in most cases, you would want to use Volley over Wild Bloom or Scout Ahead instead. So I think you can make an argue that Volley is just a better version of both. And you need pretty niche situations where Scout Ahead would want to really snipe down one of those big worms that's messing with you in late game, or Wild Bloom really needs to deal with a bunch of middle to heavier guys after a Nexus. I think that you could argue either way.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Wild Bloom for me is a bunch of enemies just spawned right next to each other at one of the spawning portals in the gate defense mission, or a lot of defend missions where they just try to crowd you with a ton of enemies at once. Wild Bloom can be very powerful, but I agree if it's more like a transversal map, especially if there's darkness, Scout Ahead can be handy. I think the argument's pretty close. So, and I actually placed Piercing Arrow. We haven't moved Nock Back, though. I think I'm going to move Nock Back just behind Piercing Arrow. Again, 2 extremely close cards for me. Nock Back is way more powerful in the situations it is powerful. But Piercing Arrow is always consistent. Nock Back, I think the thing for me that was putting it ahead is Ogre Queen, especially. It's just... It's the best card in the game versus Ogre Queen, I think, at the level you have it, because you don't have any of your stun cards like Skullrattle or the Rogue's stun
or Snaring
card.
Vines even.
Yep, no Snaring Vines. Nock Back is the best card in the game against the Ogre Queen. But Piercing Arrow is going to be with you your entire run. There's never going to be a time where I flex it, typically. Yeah, I think it deserves that spot for its consistency. And that is kind of the thing with the Ranger. They are the most consistent character. They are always going to be dealing a pretty good amount of damage, and once you get Skullrattle, they are always going to have the option to stun a big bad guy. So I think Piercing Arrow being the top B tier for me is right on the money. I'm perfectly fine with Skullrattle, Snaring, Volley being in the order they are, where they are. They're great. B tier is a little contentious, and I think that's perfect for the Ranger. I like a little flexibility. And I'll be honest, when I first played the Ranger, this was the character I was least excited about, because I started with like the first 3 cards, and I was like, man, this is really like stock standard. I maybe move, I take a shot, and that's my turn. But I think the fun thing about the Ranger for me is that like a lot of their best cards unlock, like their progression feels strong. Like the Arcanist, all of his best cards are front loaded except Aetherize. You get Gravity Nexus is like your 3rd card. You get Stargate second. Like holy hell. Like, you're like, okay, Aetherize is great, but like what the hell am I using Mirror Image for ever? Chaos Beam? Nah. But yeah, no, I really like the Ranger after having spent more time with her. I'm rambling though, so let's open it. General discussion.
There is one pitch I will make. I almost did it when I was ranking this card, but I want to get your guys' opinions on if either of you would be willing to move this. Obviously, Skullrattle Shot is, like, near the top of S tier. It is one of the most game-warping abilities in the entire game, full stop. Like, you will run strength trinkets, you will run and actively use strength weapons, or avidly request for lava rock strength buffs solely for Skullrattle to do its thing.
Yep.
Like, it is one of the best cards in the game, and there's no contention with that at all. So it's top of S tier. Is there any case where Snaring Vines sneaks in at bottom of S? My pitch for this is simple. My pitch for this is simple. This is the best movement tool in the game, not named Stargate. I think the applications of this in terms of the missions where it's good is very strong. The mission that particularly comes to mind is the gate protection mission, where you have the dudes coming from the bottom and the top left and top right corners towards the middle of the map, and they're going to try and reach the exit squares. This just shuts down a lane, like, permanently. And I think with the application you have with push effects, and with application you have with this for trapping dudes as they try to approach you, I think you could make a case for this being bottom of S. I think it kind of is like a better version of Bring It On, which is so gut-wrenching to say. But I think you could argue it. I think I'd personally still leave it in A for the same reason we kept Bring It On in B, which is the fact that late game guys tend to be more range focused. But I was considering this when I was ranking this card, and I want your 2 opinions.
So when I think of S tier cards, I think either they have an extremely crippling crowd control effect. And actually, no, I think for me it has to be both. They have to both have a strong crowd control effect and then either some or a catastrophic amount of damage if they're just for damage. Snaring Vines is the best movement card in the game for your character. The difference between it and Stargate for me, and I openly say that movement is typically better than teleport, but the thing with Stargate is you're teleporting an enemy up to 6 spaces away from where they start, and that, or an ally for that matter. And it can be a kill card in a lot of situations, as long as there is some sort of pit or edge to throw them off. And that's why Stargate gets its placement with us, or for me especially. I think of like Skullrattle Shot is a move 2, damage 5. The thing that Snaring Vine lacks for me is it doesn't have that kill threat despite its great movement. It does have a really strong crowd control option, but like compared to the Rogue's cards, for example, and we haven't gotten to the Rogue, but it doesn't have the same level. Like Blind is more generally applicable as a crowd control option. Like Root is only really going to affect your melee enemies, especially, and it's strong against them, but like Blind and especially Stun are generally the better options.
I think it just boils down to there are situations where it could feel like S tier doesn't happen a lot. And that's when Act 3 rolls around, there's a bunch of ranged enemies. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there are maps, such as the boss battles, wherein you don't need the mobility. But if you can't root the enemy, you don't need the mobility. This card is a flex card. It's going out of the deck. Similar to Nock Back. I do think it's better than Nock Back. That's why it deserves A tier. Because it can do more things than Nock Back. But it doesn't deserve S tier because there is a time that you will want it out of the deck. I think for an S tier card, it should always be in the deck.
I'll have you know, I take Stargate out on the Ogre Queen because I need other options, and there are no pits.
Stargate, I think, is the only exception I would give, simply because of how, again, like,
game-breaking the card is
good, and then how game-breaking the card is. And because you can use it for objectives as well, it makes everything so much easier. And the fact of the matter as well, I think for the Arcanist's kit, wherein you really have a lot of situational cards, we had a really populated D tier for the Arcanist. So even if I keep Stargate around, it's not like I'm gonna put another card in that's really going to be situationally useful. I'm still using Gravity Nexus if I want to hit multiple targets. I'm using Aetherize if I want to do single target damage. I'm using Storm Chain or Thunderclap if I'm trying to conserve mana. So after those cards, I'm not bringing anything else. I'm not bringing Fleming's Flux. I'm not bringing any of the decoys, the D tiers. Unlike, let's say, the Ranger, where I think there is an argument for if you take out Snaring Vines and Nock Back when they're not applicable. There is an argument to put in, let's say, Wild Bloom. Because for the situation where the enemies are clustered up like that, then you would use it.
I will say, I think the applications where Snaring Vines doesn't make your kit are far less applicable than you describe. I think just considering how much you preach movement options, and this is the Ranger's best movement option because it's its only one. The main card I was comparing this to, and the reason I was bringing up this question in the first place, and I want to tie this to a point you made, Shoal, is that Crowd Surf made our S tier. Despite the fact that that card's not AoE, despite the fact that it's not game warping in terms of its positional advantage on the battlefield, it is a nuclear button. It just does one thing insanely well for it to get to S tier, which is a great usage of that card because it's an insane card because it gives you extra 2 steps to get the damage racked up, so you could easily see upwards of 13, 14, 15, 16 damage off a Crowd Surf.
Right.
Yep.
That can...
And a bunch of buffs on the board.
Yeah, that can detonate an entire group. So, or not an entire group, but a specific target, which is good for bosses. But I can see Snaring Vine staying here, and it doesn't surprise me that I was the card pitching for this to be good, considering I'm the Bard guy.
Hey, it's still really good. It's just I think
Vines is like... It's the second best card you get.
Vines with the Rogue as well. Reed is good, plus the Vines, it's just extra damage.
I think that this is... It doesn't surprise me that I also really like this card, considering I already mentioned its connections to BIO. This is the card that when I eventually do another Ranger run, I really want to experiment more with. I really want to experiment and cook with Snaring Vines, because I think it has an assortment of magical applications that I just haven't found yet.
In the same way that Bring It On is the most exciting card of the Berserkers kit for me, I think Snaring Vines is the most exciting card of the Rangers kit for me.
Yep, I agree with that too.
Thank you all for joining us today. Let us know how we did. If you got opinions about the Ranger, especially their OTP, their cannon ship, please leave us a comment down below. Next week, we'll be ranking... Well, hang on, because next week, we were going to do the Rogue, but... There's something exciting happening in our community. There is a version 2.0 releasing for Sunderfolk, and with it, a brand new character.
Wow!
So, we'll see how things stack up for us, but we may be having a live premiere for the Vanguard next week. So stay tuned.
Woo!
And in the meantime... we'll see y'all out in the Sunderlands.